In a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood where life moved at a predictable pace, Alex Carter lived with their family in a cozy home they had worked hard to afford. It wasn't fancy, but it was comfortable, a place where weekends were spent gardening and evenings were filled with laughter over dinner. For years, Alex had been on good terms with the neighbors, attending block parties and even helping organize a few community cleanup events. Life was simple, predictable, and peaceful, until one crisp autumn morning when everything changed. That morning, as Alex sipped coffee on the porch, a white envelope slipped through the mail slot caught their eye. Curious, they opened it to find a formal notice from the Homeowners Association, HOA. The letter announced plans for an upcoming holiday parade, set to roll down their street. At first glance, it seemed like harmless fun, festive floats, marching bands, and cheerful crowds. But as Alex read further, their stomachs sank. The parade route, according to the map included in the letter, would completely block access to their driveway for nearly the entire day. For most people, this might have been a minor inconvenience, but for Alex, it was a major problem. Just weeks earlier, they had started a new job that required frequent travel. Their work schedule often meant leaving early or returning late, and having no access to their driveway could jeopardize their ability to get to important meetings or catch flights. What's more, Alex's aging mother occasionally visited and relied on easy access to the driveway for her mobility scooter. Blocking it off felt not only inconvenient but potentially dangerous. Determined to resolve the issue before things escalated, Alex decided to reach out to the HOA. They composed a polite email explaining their situation and requesting that the parade route be adjusted slightly to avoid blocking their driveway. Surely, they thought, the HOA would understand and make accommodations. After all, the neighborhood prided itself on being family-friendly and considerate of everyone's needs, or so Alex believed. To their surprise, the response came quickly, but it wasn't what they hoped for. The HOA replied with a curt message stating that changing the route wasn't feasible due to logistical reasons. The parade has already been planned, and altering the path would disrupt other residents. The email read. Alex tried again, this time calling the HOA president directly. During the phone call, they emphasized how critical driveway access was for their daily life. However, the conversation ended abruptly, with the president insisting there was nothing they could do. Frustrated and feeling dismissed, Alex began to wonder if the HOA cared about anything beyond putting on a flashy event. They couldn't help but notice that several neighbors who served on the HOA board lived farther away from the parade route and wouldn't experience the same level of disruption. Was this decision really about creating a joyful celebration for the community, or was it just another example of those in power ignoring the concerns of ordinary homeowners? As days turned into weeks, Alex found themselves growing increasingly resentful. Every time they saw flyers advertising the parade taped to lampposts or heard excited chatter among neighbors, they felt a pang of irritation. This wasn't just about convenience anymore, it was personal. The HOA had made it clear that Alex's needs didn't matter, and that realization stung. Little did anyone know, this perceived slight would soon lead to a bold and unexpected retaliation, one that would shake the entire neighborhood to its core. As the weeks passed, Alex's frustration simmered just below the surface, bubbling up whenever they thought about the upcoming parade. What started as a minor inconvenience had grown into something much bigger, a personal battle against an organization that seemed unwilling to listen. The HOA's refusal to budge wasn't just annoying. It felt like a deliberate disregard for their concerns. Every time Alex drove past the neighborhood bulletin board or saw decorations going up around the area, their irritation deepened. It was becoming clear that this wasn't going to blow over quietly. The tension reached its peak during a community meeting held in the local recreation center. Notices had been posted throughout the neighborhood, inviting residents to discuss final details for the parade. Though Alex hadn't planned to attend at first, curiosity and a growing sense of injustice pushed them to show up. The room buzzed with excitement as neighbors chatted about float designs, candy giveaways, and parking arrangements. But Alex sat silently at the back, arms crossed, waiting for their chance to speak. When the floor opened for comments, Alex raised their hand hesitantly. As they stood up, all eyes turned toward them. With calm but firm words, they explained how blocking their driveway would disrupt not only their work schedule, but also their mother's ability to visit safely. "I'm not asking for the parade to be canceled," Alex said, their voice steady despite the knot of nerves in their stomach. "All I'm asking is for a small adjustment so my family isn't left stranded." Their plea fell flat. A few neighbors nodded sympathetically, but others rolled their eyes or whispered dismissive remarks under their breath. One man even muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "It's just one day. Can't you deal with it?" The comment stung, but what really set Alex off was the response from the HOA president. Instead of acknowledging Alex's concerns, the president shrugged and reiterated that changing the route was impossible. Their tone carried an air of finality, as if daring Alex to challenge them further. Unable to stay silent any longer, Alex snapped, "Impossible, or just inconvenient for ****." They shot back, their voice rising slightly. "You're willing to inconvenience me and my family because it's easier for you to ignore us than find a solution." The room erupted into murmurs, some people siding with Alex while others defended the HOA. Tempers flared as the debate grew heated, and by the end of the meeting, no resolution had been reached. If anything, the divide between Alex and the HOA, and even among the neighbors themselves, had widened. In the days that followed, gossip spread like wildfire. Some residents admired Alex's courage to stand up to the HOA, calling them brave for speaking out. Others labeled them difficult or selfish, claiming they were ruining the festive spirit of the event. Social media groups dedicated to the neighborhood lit up with arguments, memes, and accusations. Even friends who had once been close to Alex began avoiding them, unsure which side to take in the escalating drama. Feeling increasingly isolated, Alex realized that appealing to reason wasn't going to work. The HOA wasn't budging, and trying to win over the neighbors seemed futile. But instead of giving up, a spark of determination ignited within them. If logic and politeness weren't enough to make the HOA listen, maybe something bolder would. Late one night, as Alex scrolled through legal documents online, an idea began to form, one so audacious that it made their heart race. Little did anyone know, Alex was about to turn the tables in a way no one could have predicted. What started as a simple request had now become a full-blown showdown, and Alex was ready to play their ace. With the parade just weeks away, Alex spent every spare moment researching ways to fight back against the HOA's stubbornness. They weren't sure what they were looking for at first, maybe a loophole in local ordinances or some kind of legal precedent that could force the HOA to reconsider. But as they dug deeper into property laws and municipal regulations, something unexpected caught their attention. Portions of the parade route ran through privately owned land. It turned out that while most streets in the neighborhood were public, a few sections had been leased by the city from private owners for community use. This meant that certain stretches of road weren't technically public in the traditional sense. They belonged to individuals who allowed temporary access for events like parades. Intrigued, Alex zoomed in on the map included with the HOA's original notice. Sure enough, one small but critical section of the parade route passed through a parcel of land listed as privately owned. Alex's mind raced with possibilities. If someone owned that piece of land, then technically, the parade couldn't happen without their permission. And if they became the owner. Suddenly, an audacious plan began to take shape. At first, Alex dismissed the idea as too extreme. It would cost money, time, and effort, not to mention draw even more attention to their feud with the HOA. But the more they thought about it, the more appealing it seemed. After all, how else could they make the HOA understand just how serious they were? The next day, Alex called a real estate agent specializing in small plots of land. Pretending to be interested in investing, They casually asked about purchasing the parcel in question. To their surprise, the process was simpler than expected. The current owner, an elderly woman living out of state, had no interest in holding on to the land and was happy to sell quickly. Within days, Alex signed the paperwork and officially became the proud and slightly nervous owner of a tiny strip of asphalt right smack in the middle of the parade route. Once the deal was finalized, Alex wasted no time putting their plan into action. They hired a contractor to install a large private property, no trespassing sign near the edge of their new property line. Then, armed with copies of the deed and legal documents proving ownership, Alex sent a formal letter to the HOA. In clear, unambiguous language, they explained that unless the parade route was altered to avoid their land, the event would have to stop mid-March or risk violating trespassing laws. The response from the HOA was immediate and furious. Phone calls and emails poured in, accusing Alex of being unreasonable, petty, and vindictive. One board member even threatened legal action, claiming Alex was trying to hold the neighborhood hostage. But Alex remained calm, knowing they had the upper hand. When pressed during a tense phone call, they simply replied, "I'm not blocking the parade. I'm exercising my rights as a property owner. If you want the parade to continue uninterrupted, you'll need to work with me." Word of Alex's bold move spread quickly through the neighborhood. Some residents were shocked, calling it an over-the-top reaction to a minor issue. Others secretly admired their creativity and determination, whispering that the HOA deserved a taste of its own medicine. Meanwhile, the HOA scrambled to find solutions, but none were straightforward. Redirecting the parade would require rerouting traffic, notifying participants, and potentially entering sponsors, all of which would reflect poorly on the organization. For the first time, it seemed, the HOA was facing consequences for ignoring a homeowner's concerns. As the days ticked closer to the parade, anticipation built among the neighbors. Would Alex really go through with shutting down the event? Or would the HOA cave and change the route? Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. Alex had captured everyone's attention and proven that sometimes standing up for yourself requires thinking outside the box. The day of the parade finally arrived, and the neighborhood buzzed with excitement. Colorful banners hung from lampposts, children clutched bags ready to be filled with candy, and floats lined up at the starting point, their decorations glinting in the crisp morning sunlight. The air was thick with anticipation as families gathered along the route, eager to enjoy what promised to be a cheerful celebration. But amidst the festive atmosphere, there was an undercurrent of tension, a quiet awareness that something unusual might unfold. As the parade began, everything seemed normal at first. Marching bands played upbeat tunes, dancers twirled in sparkling costumes, and classic cars cruised slowly down the street, waving cheerfully to the crowd. Spectators cheered and snapped photos, soaking in the joyous energy. Then, just as the procession reached the halfway point, chaos erupted. Right where Alex's newly purchased parcel of land lay, the parade came to an abrupt halt. Confused participants looked around, unsure why the flow had stopped. That's when Alex appeared, standing confidently beside their private property. No trespassing sign. Dressed casually but radiating determination, they crossed their arms and addressed the organizers who rushed over to investigate. "This is my property," Alex stated firmly, holding up a copy of the deed for emphasis. "Unless you have written permission from me, which you don't, the parade cannot continue through here." Gasps rippled through the crowd as people realized what was happening. Some spectators leaned forward, craning their necks to get a better view, while others whipped out their phones to record the unfolding drama. The HOA president arrived on the scene, visibly flustered. "This is ridiculous," they exclaimed, trying to maintain authority despite the growing commotion. "You're ruining the event for everyone." Alex didn't back down. Calmly but resolutely, they replied, "I'm not ruining anything. You ignored my concerns when I asked nicely. Now you're seeing the consequences of that decision." Attempts to negotiate quickly spiraled into heated arguments. Organizers pleaded with Alex to reconsider, offering last-minute compromises like shortening the parade or skipping only the blocked section. But Alex stood firm, refusing to budge without a guarantee that future events would take homeowners' needs into account. Meanwhile, stranded floats idled awkwardly in the middle of the road, and marching band members shuffled uncertainly, unsure whether to keep playing or pack up. Social media exploded almost instantly. Videos of the standoff went viral, sparking fierce debates online. Supporters praised Alex's boldness, calling them a hero for standing up to an unyielding HOA. Critics, however, accused them of being selfish and ruining a beloved tradition for hundreds of residents. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds, with users passionately defending their sides. Back on the street, the situation grew increasingly chaotic. Parents tried to distract restless kids, vendors selling snacks grumbled about lost sales, and some frustrated attendees began heading home early. For those who stayed, though, the spectacle was undeniable entertainment. Neighbors whispered among themselves, speculating about how far Alex would actually go, and whether the HOA would find a way to salvage the day. Despite the mounting pressure, Alex remained composed. They knew this moment wasn't just about blocking a parade. It was about sending a message. If the HOA wanted to treat homeowners' concerns as optional, then Alex was determined to show them the cost of such arrogance. As the standoff dragged on, one thing became clear: the neighborhood, and perhaps even the wider community, would never look at the HOA the same way again. By the time the dust settled on that chaotic parade day, Alex's bold move had become the talk of the town, and far beyond. News outlets picked up the story, turning what was meant to be a small neighborhood parade into a national conversation about homeowners' rights, entitlement, and community dynamics. Social media feeds were flooded with memes, hot takes, and heated debates. Some called Alex a modern-day David taking on a bureaucratic Goliath, while others branded them as selfish and unreasonable. The divide in opinions only fueled the fire, keeping the story alive for days. Local news crews descended on the neighborhood, setting up cameras outside Alex's house and interviewing residents who either supported or condemned their actions. One neighbor, a retired teacher named Margaret, defended Alex passionately. They weren't asking for much, just a little consideration. She told a reporter, "The HOA acts like they're untouchable, but this shows they can't ignore people forever." On the flip side, another resident, a father of 3, expressed frustration. "I get why Alex is upset, but did they really have to ruin it for everyone? My kids were so excited." Meanwhile, Alex found themselves thrust into the spotlight, fielding calls from journalists eager to hear their side of the story. Though initially overwhelmed by the attention, they used the platform to explain their perspective calmly and clearly. In interviews, Alex emphasized that their goal wasn't to disrupt the parade out of spite, but to highlight systemic issues within the HOA. "This isn't about me versus the neighborhood," they said during one televised segment. "It's about holding an organization accountable when they refuse to listen. If I hadn't done something drastic, would anyone have paid attention?" The HOA, meanwhile, scrambled to mitigate the damage. Board members held emergency meetings behind closed doors, debating how to handle the fallout. Publicly, they tried to paint Alex as unreasonable, insisting that accommodating every homeowner's request was impossible. Privately, however, cracks began to show within the organization. Longtime members whispered about mismanagement and questioned whether their hardline approach had gone too far. For years, the HOA had operated with little pushback, confident in their authority. But now, their reputation was hanging by a thread. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. Angry residents demanded answers at impromptu town hall meetings, some threatening to withhold dues unless changes were made. Sponsors who had contributed funds for the parade started pulling out, citing negative publicity. Even city officials weighed in, urging the HOA to resolve the conflict quickly before it damaged the community's image further. It was clear The HOA couldn't afford to dig in its heels any longer. Finally, after weeks of resistance, the HOA issued a formal apology, a rare move for an organization known for its rigidity. In a written statement, they acknowledged that dismissing Alex's concerns had been a mistake and pledged to review their policies regarding event planning and communication with homeowners. They also extended an olive branch, offering to meet with Alex directly to discuss solutions moving forward. While the gesture was seen as a step in the right direction, many wondered if it was too little, too late. For Alex, the apology felt bittersweet. Part of them was relieved that their actions had sparked meaningful dialogue, but another part couldn't forget how dismissive the HOA had been in the first place. Still, they agreed to sit down with the board, knowing that real change required collaboration, not just confrontation. As they prepared for the meeting, Alex reflected on everything that had transpired. What started as a personal grievance had snowballed into something much larger, a catalyst for accountability and reform. Whether the HOA would follow through on their promises remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. No one in the neighborhood would ever underestimate the power of standing up for oneself again. The meeting between Alex and the HOA board took place in the same community center where tensions had boiled over weeks earlier. This time, however, the atmosphere was different, calmer but charged with a sense of cautious optimism. Both sides entered the room knowing that compromise was necessary to move forward. The HOA representatives, once dismissive and unyielding, now seemed more willing to listen. For Alex, this was an opportunity to ensure their actions hadn't been in vain. The discussion began with the HOA formally apologizing again, this time face to face. They admitted that their initial response to Alex's concerns had been inadequate and acknowledged the harm caused by ignoring a homeowner's needs. While some members still bristled at the idea of being forced into change, most appeared genuinely contrite. One board member even admitted, "We got too caught up in making things perfect for the parade and forgot about the people it might inconvenience." Alex appreciated the acknowledgement, but made it clear that words alone weren't enough. "An apology is good," they said, leaning slightly forward in their chair, "but I want to see real action. If we're going to prevent situations like this from happening again, you need to rethink how decisions are made and who gets heard." What followed was a lengthy conversation about revising HOA policies. With input from Alex and other residents invited to join the meeting, the board agreed to implement several key changes. First, they promised to create a formal process for addressing homeowner concerns before finalizing plans for large-scale events. This would include mandatory consultations with affected residents and clearer communication channels. Second, they committed to reviewing all event routes ahead of time to avoid similar conflicts in the future. Finally, they proposed forming a neighborhood advisory committee, made up of ordinary homeowners, to provide feedback on HOA decisions. In return, Alex offered a concession of their own. They agreed to allow the unused portion of their property to revert to public use for the remainder of the year, ensuring no further disruptions to scheduled events. However, they retained ownership of the land as leverage, a subtle reminder that they wouldn't hesitate to act if the HOA failed to honor its promises. "I don't want to hold this over anyone's head," Alex explained. "But trust has to be earned, not given freely." As the meeting drew to a close, there was a palpable sense of relief in the air. Though the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, both parties left feeling hopeful about the possibility of rebuilding trust. For the HOA, the incident served as a wake-up call, a reminder that their authority depended on serving the community fairly. For Alex, it validated their belief that standing up for oneself could lead to meaningful change. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood began to heal. Residents who had taken sides during the feud slowly started reconnecting, realizing that the drama had overshadowed the sense of unity that had once defined their community. Some even joked about the infamous parade blockade, turning what had been a contentious moment into a shared memory. The HOA worked diligently to repair its image, sending out newsletters detailing policy updates and hosting open forums to encourage transparency. For Alex, life returned to a semblance of normalcy, but nothing felt quite the same. Neighbors who had once barely known their name now greeted them warmly, some even thanking them for pushing back against the HOA. Others remained wary, unsure whether to admire or resent their boldness. Despite the mixed reactions, Alex couldn't deny the satisfaction of having sparked a shift in how things were done. Their driveway was no longer blocked, but more importantly, their voice, and the voices of others like them, was finally being heard. Though labeled entitled by some critics, Alex knew their actions had struck a chord far beyond their quiet suburban street. In standing up for themselves, they had inadvertently shone a light on larger issues of fairness, accountability, and the balance of power within communities. And while the battle had been exhausting, the outcome proved one thing. Sometimes, shaking things up is exactly what's needed to bring about lasting change. Months after the parade fiasco, life in the neighborhood began to settle into a new rhythm. The once divided community slowly stitched itself back together, though faint scars remained as reminders of the drama that had unfolded. Alex's bold stand against the HOA became something of a local legend, a story recounted at dinner tables and block parties, with equal parts amusement and admiration. To some, Alex was a symbol of resistance against unchecked authority. To others, they were still a polarizing figure. But love them or not, no one could deny that their actions had left an indelible mark on the neighborhood. For Alex personally, things returned to a quieter pace. They continued living their life much as they had before, tending to their garden, spending time with family, and occasionally waving hello to neighbors passing by. Yet there was an undeniable shift in how people interacted with them. Strangers who had once dismissed them now approached with curiosity, eager to share their thoughts, or simply express gratitude for challenging the status quo. Even longtime acquaintances treated them differently, often seeking their opinion during casual conversations about community matters. It was strange but oddly validating to realize that their voice carried weight now. The HOA, too, underwent significant changes. True to their word, they implemented the new policies discussed during the meeting with Alex. Event planning became more inclusive, with regular surveys sent out to gather feedback from homeowners. A newly formed advisory committee ensured that decisions weren't made unilaterally, giving residents a real say in how their neighborhood operated. Though progress was gradual, these reforms helped rebuild trust between the HOA and the community. Some skeptics remained cautious, waiting to see if the changes would stick. But overall, morale improved significantly. As winter approached, the neighborhood prepared for its annual holiday lights competition, a tradition everyone looked forward to without controversy. For the first time in years, participation soared, with even Alex joining in by stringing colorful lights along their porch railing. Walking through the streets on a chilly December evening, it was hard to imagine the tension that had gripped the area just months earlier. Laughter echoed through the crisp air as families admired each other's decorations, sharing hot cocoa and stories of festive preparations. Reflecting on everything that had transpired, Alex couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and relief. Their decision to buy the land and shut down the parade hadn't been easy. It had come with stress, backlash, and sleepless nights, but it had ultimately achieved what they'd hoped for: accountability. More importantly, it had sparked a broader conversation about fairness and communication within the community. People were kinder, more willing to listen, and less quick to dismiss differing perspectives. Still, Alex knew they weren't perfect. There were moments when they wondered if they'd gone too far or let their emotions cloud their judgment. But those doubts were tempered by the knowledge that sometimes making noise is necessary to be heard. In standing up for themselves, they had inspired others to do the same. Neighbors who had previously stayed silent about grievances began speaking up, confident that their concerns wouldn't be brushed aside anymore. One evening, as Alex sat on their porch watching the sunset, a neighbor stopped by with a plate of homemade cookies. "Just wanted to say thanks," the woman said with a warm smile. "You might have stirred up trouble, but you also made us better." Alex chuckled softly, accepting the gesture with gratitude. It wasn't the accolades or recognition that mattered most. It was knowing that their actions had planted seeds of change. In the end, Alex's story served as a reminder that ordinary people can make extraordinary impacts. Whether labeled courageous or entitled, they proved that persistence and creativity can challenge even the most entrenched systems. And while they never sought to become the center of attention, they embraced the role fate had handed them, with humility, resilience, and a touch of humor. After all, sometimes shaking things up isn't just about winning battles. It's about leaving the world a little better than you found it.